From UFOs to psychic powers and government conspiracies, history is riddled with unexplained events. You can turn back now or learn the stuff they don't want you to know. A production of iHeartRadio.
Hello, welcome back to the show. My name is Matt.
My name is Noel.
They call me Ben. We're joined, as always, with our super producer, Dylan, the Tennessee pal, Fagan. Most importantly, you are here. That makes this the stuff they don't want you to know. Guys, you remember that it's an observation that only grows more relevant over time. People say no one wants to be living through the times in which history is made. Right.
Yeah, kind of impossible, though, because I guess history's sort of always being made, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. We're working live.
Yeah.
Well, I think it means people want to not have the stress and maybe fear and all of the things that come with a big historical event, right?
Too bad, suckers.
Well, I know, but human
This is
beings,
where you find yourself.
we
All
want
of us.
smooth sailing, I think. I think
For sure.
generally that's what human beings want. But we've also got this thing where in our media and things, most of the stuff we're really interested in is the exciting, crazy stuff.
From the past, but also from the present, as
Or the
long as
future.
it's not touching us. Yeah. And the future, as long as it's not over the horizon quite yet. And history proves time and time again, we've seen this on every show we have touched as EPs, as voice actors, as writers, as hosts. History proves that in chaotic times, the public will look for alternatives to the status quo, whatever that status quo may be. Sometimes this leads to things that history calls good revolutions, the French and American Revolution, right? When the rejection of monarchy. And then sometimes, it gets a little Sith Lordy. Chaos can lead to a search for alternatives like fascism or dictatorships or coups.
Chaos reigns.
Chaos reigns, and chaos is a ladder, for better or worse.
I watched a Mr. Robot episode where one of the characters used that term and used it in that way.
Yeah,
it was
would be
Mr.
fun-
Robot, in fact.
A fun twist on a child's board game would be coups and ladders.
I love it.
Yeah.
Oh,
I think it's brilliant.
Just saying, it could be fun.
And what we also see here is that just like our discussion with governments and AI, the modern information age hasn't really changed this tendency. Instead, it's ushered in a new toolbox, a new way to escalate this pattern. That's why there are so many world governments accused of interfering with elections and sovereign domestic politics. And tonight's story, okay, first off, yes, this is a story about political conspiracies, but also it's a story about patterns. This is about a country that might be facing something similar as we record. The rise of the far right in Japan and the growing allegations that there may be a conspiracy powering it.
Absolutely. But first, we're going to hear a quick word from our sponsor.
Here are the facts. All right, we've talked about this a lot. I don't want to sound like a weeaboo, and we're going to keep any personal anecdotes to a bare minimum.
Not me. I'm putting it all out there.
can I just say, I think your experience, Ben, in particular, would be extremely helpful for this episode. I feel a bit in the dark as we're going into this, but just
Certainly
knowing
in
that
terms of on the ground experience of this kind of thing, because, a lot of these things don't even make the news over here. A lot of the things that we're going to be talking about today, let alone being available for us to, set our very eyes on and see the way it functions.
I just think your input and or any anecdote you've got, Ben, could be extremely helpful for me personally to understand this a little better.
I think I hear you and appreciate it. I think we'll also be darkly surprised by how many parallels are going to be in this story across the ocean's blue. Across the ocean's blue. Sorry, I'm of a maritime sort of mind these days, guys.
Yeah, what are we talking about? We're talking about the crime cruise, right? Is that what it's called?
Yes,
No, that's not what it's called, but it's sort of like that. We're doing a Virgin mega cruise, true crime themed. We're going to be on the high seas. Coming up pretty soon. I think you can still buy your tickets, y'all.
I believe so. Yeah. This is our organic mention, and we're being so smooth with it. October 10th through the 15th. Join us. The Dominican
Hopefully
days.
for smooth seas. That's the hope.
Yeah.
And look, if you come on this thing, you might go snorkeling with us. Weird. There might be sharks involved.
There might be trivia,
Yeah, you might see a shipwreck. You'll definitely go through the Bermuda Triangle with us, where we have hatched up the bright idea of recording our Bermuda Triangle episode live from the location.
No tempting fate there. It's going to be fine. Join us. You can hold hands.
Guys, I've got the first version of the video, and I'm working on the sound design and music right now that's going to play as people are coming in. We're going to make people feel so freaking uncomfortable and scared.
No, don't say that.
We're going to bring people together.
This is not sanctioned by the Virgin Corporation, Matthew.
Yes.
And like the Decemberists said, if worse comes to worse, we'll both go down together.
They also said, I'm a jolly little chimbley boy.
Is that a veiled if we're both going down together? Is that
I think that one's about jumping off of a building, but it's metaphor laden. So there's a lot of possibility there. And this will be great because it will get all of us together in this one place, and we'll be focused on one thing, and we'll probably agree with the revelations we discover. And that's cool because it doesn't usually happen anywhere else in human society, right? Outside of a focused show or exploration.
I thought you were just going to say outside of our particular friend group. Never anywhere else does this occur.
We fight all the time.
In the end, we're going to explore mysteries, and you'll take away whatever you take from it, right? But in the end,
possibly even a souvenir.
Yeah, but you'll be in the Bermuda Triangle.
It's going to be sick. I'm excited. I haven't been on a cruise before. I'm really, really looking forward to hanging out with you guys on the high seas and talk about some spooky stuff.
And with that, the reason we're emphasizing this idea of agreeing, being on the same page, and why that is so important is because pretty much any other place you go or any other human endeavor you encounter, you will see that everyone disagrees. And Japan is no different. Japan is full of competing ideologies and political parties. This is not unique. It is not unusual.
Well, and it's funny. I was just going to ask, maybe this is a dumb question, but we're talking about the right and the left. Obviously, when I ask to the right or left of what, the answer is center. But who determines, culturally, which ideology is represented by which side of zero?
That's an interesting question. That's one we'll get to because every center party, is a your mileage may vary situation. And historically, we'll get into this a little bit. Historically, you would call Japan more or less culturally conservative. And a lot of East Asia, to be fair, is that way. But in Japan, just like anywhere else, anywhere you go, you're going to find a spectrum of groups with priorities and values that sometimes combine and converge and then sometimes contradict, and people get at loggerheads. Here in the United States, for example, speaking of centrism, there are two big political parties. You got the Democrats, you got the Republicans, but each of those terms, as we've discussed before, and some pretty cool stuff, each of those terms is it's an umbrella phrase, because under the umbrella of democracy, you'll find, the little umbrellas of Democrats, little umbrella of Republicans, and under that, a panoply of tinier umbrellas, tinier movements.
And ultimately, it all represents campaign finance donations, right? And which primary corporations and entities donate to which of those two parties, and then how is that divided up amongst individual candidates?
And not to mention that, you're talking about campaign. we're talking about a collection of campaign promises and sort of treatises that are put out there exclusively in the form of rhetoric, and let's just call it what it is, propaganda that doesn't always add up to the way things actually end up, when folks are elected from either side.
Absolutely. I just want to make that point that it ends up, those cliques that we're talking about inside the bigger umbrella groups, often those are divided up amongst groups of people, groups of what appear to be independent, let's say representatives or people from certain states or a scattering of states. You can use money and, like Cardi B, make money moves to create cliques and movements of belief, of what a group is all about within this umbrella. And all you have to do is inject enough money to get enough candidates to believe the same thing then you can push that and push it and push it and grow it and make it larger until it potentially can take over one of these umbrellas.
And becomes the establishment.
And it's so cynical, I know it, but I mean, I can't help but think that the only true belief is in the money, and that a lot of the other ones are just sort of weaponized beliefs that are used to sort of manipulate the populace. Like, I just have a real hard time believing in true believers in government, you know?
Yeah, I hear you. The one thing we would add as an asterisk to this is that money is a representation of resource, right? It's labor over time. So there are historically massive upheavals in social dynamics where people are starving and someone comes along and says, "I'll feed you," right? And you can worry about the other stuff. We can talk about that later, but wouldn't you like to eat something when you like some rutabagas, some squash, etc.? And
no more rutabagas, please.
Never.
Well, that's a good way to get loyalty, right?
Right, exactly. And so money then is an escalation of that age-old concept. And I love your point about the Overton window, right? So here in the U.S., sure, the big boys, the Democrats and the Republicans, actively work together like Pepsi and Coke to repress competitors, to kill them in the womb, really, or
buy them,
neuter them somehow, right? Sanitize, sterilize them. And that's why far right movements and far left movements and independent movements are all over the U.S., but the FEC won't let them be. And that's fine.
Yeah.
Since
that is the
hip-hop
Federal
references.
Election Commission? Is that right?
That is,
okay.
yeah. Check out our episode on that. Speaking
Good luck.
cynical.
Yeah, good luck getting on a debate that it means anything whatsoever if you're one of those parties.
It's sort of like Oscar campaigns. Like, everyone thinks magically that the best things win the Oscar, but the things that win the Oscar are the ones that had the big money behind them to make their Oscar campaigns. You know, it's this illusion of quality, or this illusion of like democracy, I guess, or, you know, of what's the word I'm looking for? Meritocracy.
Yes, meritocracy. I love that word. And I wish it was practiced more often. Also, you know, one thing that's totally different from that, of course, is the podcast awards. Everybody tune in for the Ambies and the Webbies coming to a town near you.
Yeah, definitely. The fix isn't in on those.
So we see that these smaller groups, right, may team up with the big dogs on certain issues, right? Like the LDP, which is a weirdly misleading name, is the big party in Japan. We'll get to them. But they have, under their umbrella, they have a lot of other smaller parties that agree with them on certain issues and will team up with them to vote for certain things and policies. But at the same time, these smaller crews, these smaller cliques are still pushing other parts of their respective agendas. That happens constantly.
And Japan is a quote-unquote proper democracy, right?
Well, yes.
Okay. I'm just asking the question. Yeah, I don't know. It's not on like, it's just not something that I am completely immersed in, you know, and I think I get it in general, but like, I want to know when a lot of these shifts took place. And I have to imagine that some of them took place after the war.
It's a democracy on a diet.
It's a democracy on a diet. Let's get Dylan. Thank you. For anybody who notices, that is an amazing joke. That is very well written. And thank you for that, Matt. Yeah, maybe the way to say it is Japan is, God, a diet is the funniest way to say it, but Japan is a democracy that loves its royal family.
Well, that and one could maybe argue that makes it easier to control, and that it's a little more consistent than things over here might be.
Right. Yes. It's similar to what we see in European-style democracies that still have a royal family, that might have largely symbolic power, but a great deal of economic heft because they own a lot of stuff from back in the day. But they have these weird agreements that say something like, yes, you are required as the king of this place or the queen of this place to show up for these events. You make these speeches. You know what I mean?
Wear this funny outfit.
Wear this specific outfit. And then you go back home. And we, the elected representatives, are going to handle the day-to-day business of government and the wheel of power. And that's a thing that sounds silly, but it is an important distinction. And the United States, not once, but at multiple times, got so very close to having acknowledged monarchs. And it's a bullet we keep trying to matrix dodge.
And it was absolutely a post-war situation when they had a constitution drafted and became a democracy after being, having their asses handed to them at the end of World War II.
Oh, and we'll get to that one, but we have to point out, too.
I'm just answering my own question because I genuinely wasn't sure. I just was guessing that was probably the case.
You'll like it. It's tasty. Dare say it has some umami to it.
Yeah, we're going to have to get in the weeds when it comes to like what the democracy actually looks like, how it functions, the different ways it's split up. And then the emperor has some sneaky stuff in there that's way more powerful than you'd expect. And let's get into that. But first of all, let's jump back to the US really quickly, because we're talking about some of the ways in which these sub-parties, right, not the big players, can actually play a role in, let's say, an election.
Right, in pushing the Overton window of conversation. We're probably never going to have a Green Party president in most of our listeners' lifetimes. And you might hear this and be in the U.S. and you might say, look, the Green Party, what a bunch of cuckoos. Anarchy is dumb. Or you might not vibe with libertarians, or you might be embarrassed by a local politician that you personally don't support in your neck of the woods. But the thing is, that's not inherently bad. When democracy works, it gives everyone the opportunity to make their opinions known. The original donors to any campaign were always supposed to be the voters. Now, that's changed post Citizens United, and that's never been true in practice, but that's the idea on the paper.
It really is great in theory.
It's so much stuff is cool in theory. Like I told you guys about trying to invent the burrito. It's a burrito that also utilizes the amazing technology of pho, and the world's just not ready quite yet.
It's called tortilla soup.
Exactly.
It's not quite that.
Well, see, now we've just formed two different parties, and we can work together.
Okay.
So we know that these times of instability, this is just the quick abstract structuralism of it. The times of instability create opportunities for beliefs and movements that would have been dismissed as fringe, right? Everything's going to pot. Everything's going sideways and pear-shaped. And this leads us, the public, to say, there's got to be a better way, just like on a made-for-TV commercial. That's why the threat of war and economic collapse in particular historically often lead to nationalism. To degrees of countries saying, hey, us first.
Yeah. Yeah, we've been spending a lot of resources and time out there in the other worlds. What about this place, man? What about my pension? And I get that makes total sense.
I mean, when
right?
the plane's going down, they say put the mask on yourself first. So, it does click to a certain degree. But then it becomes a rhetoric in and of itself where it supplants like everything else. And sometimes even, things way outside of the realms of like logic.
Yeah, the thing about binary in-out group reasoning is that it feels very convenient at the beginning, but you have to realize that ideology only gains power as long as the in-group gets smaller and smaller. So let's say you have a dozen friends, right? And then 11 of you decide, hey, we're going to ice this one guy out. And we're just not going to talk to him. We'll have a separate group thread for that guy. And then we, the 11 real people or real friends, will have our own thing. And then from there, to continue that system, it's a Ponzi scheme of exclusion. That sounds way smarter than it is, but it's very accurate.
Seems a bit like what's happening with Putin and Modi and in China over there,
Just so. And it happens to a lot of microcosmic, like on the ground, individual friend groups. So we know that an example of nationalism threatening democracy, we can see it in the story of Marine General Smedley Butler. Real POS, back in the day, he probably stopped a coup, a fascistic coup to overthrow democracy in the U.S.
Rad podcast about it that you had a hand in, Ben, called Let's Start a Coup, if I'm not mistaken. If you want more on that, do check it out.
Appreciate it. It's the most unhinged Sesame Street kind of thing I've ever written. But it's a lot of fun. Check out the phenomenal actors and our friends at School of Humans. And this is where we get to the questions we're raising. Now, we've talked about the U.S.-Japanese parallels. We're going to see a lot of this in these conspiracies. Japan has a deep, deep history with nationalism before the horrors of World War II. You don't have to look too far back in your history book to see the evidence of that. These ultra-nationalistic forces committed heinous atrocities. They rationalized each and every one as noble acts for a greater good. Japan first.
Oh, yeah. It's an interesting thing that occurs when nationalism becomes like the main ideology, because when things are all about you and us and what we're doing and how to better us, it often leads that country or that group or that empire into other places to then make that stuff them, to make that stuff us, right? And we're talking about resources, we're talking about peoples, we're talking about a lot of accumulation essentially through, let's continue calling them heinous acts and atrocities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And this leads us to post-World War II Japan. Post-World War II Japan, ever since the close of the war, has always been a politically conservative democracy. And you don't have to agree with the policies of the dominant liberal Democratic Party, which, by the way, is, again, just a farcical name. They're not particularly liberal. They're kind of democratic. They do party, though, so 1 out of 3 for their name. But the public also votes for them. That's how democracy works. So you don't have to like that party's policies, but you do have to recognize that since World War II, in modern Japan, these have been, the big dogs. The most people agree on this party. And they're not World War II cats. They're not yelling from the rooftops to invade Manchuria. They're not saying, hey, you guys remember war crimes? Let's do some of those. They like global trade. They're not opposed to tourism. And if you put aside the usual culture wars that happen there and here in the U.S., the mainstream LDP is a lot more like, to your question, what we would call center-right, the way that the Democratic Party is a neoliberal center-right organization here in the U.S.
Interesting. Should we talk a little bit just quickly about the Constitution of Japan?
I'm interested. I mean, yeah. How did it come around? How did it come about? Who was involved? I imagine there was no small involvement from perhaps the Allies themselves, or no?
A mandate.
There you go.
Yes.
Thou shalt, a voluntel.
There you go.
Yes.
For a constitution. Yeah.
There was a constitution in 1890. Mm-hmm. And it was the one that the Empire of Japan essentially functioned upon until the end of World War II. Mm-hmm. And you get this thing it's called the Constitution of Japan, but it's known as a bunch of other things like the Peace Constitution or even the MacArthur Constitution, as in U.S. General MacArthur Constitution. Mm-hmm. That's probably the best name for it because he is the guy who ended up dictating a lot of what went into it.
Mm-hmm. And when he came in post-World War II, I love that you're mentioning that previous document. The 1890s one is from the Meiji era. And that's when Japan was undergoing this rapid modernization, industrialization, and the nation loved the possibility of new technology, right? New systems, new processes, new resources. But they also feared the erosion of traditional values and institutions. So that first modernization, if we want to play the reindeer games, that first modernization launched, arguably, it informed the ultra-nationalistic movements that arose and became such a moving force in the Japanese activities and atrocities during World War II. Because ever since the Meiji era, there's been this consistent concern about preserving traditional Japanese culture, protecting it from falling prey to the clamoring foreign hordes of the world outside, which is barbaric because it's not Japanese.
Do you guys see any parallel between other island nations that have empires from like Britain, what became the United Kingdom, and Japan here that is an island nation that is separated pretty fully from anyone else? You got to take a ship to get any goods across, to get culture across one way or the other.
I guess it is easier to be isolationist in those situations, that's for sure.
Yeah, and those powerful archipelago nations historically are going to beef up with the nearest mainland while being culturally interconnected.
Yes, which is precisely right what happened with Britain over scores and scores of years there. You think about Spain and France and the other powers that are right around that area. And then you think about China and Japan in particular and other nations that were there that it ended up warring with. So it is, I don't know, it's very interesting because at least in these two instances, you see tremendous power being built specifically for war.
For expansionism, right?
Yeah.
Lebensraum. This is a very real historical precedent. And, even in the modern day, let's jump around in time. Even in the modern day with Japan's LDP, we see there's a lot of internal dissent, and they argue about a lot of things. And one of the things that is always up for vigorous debate, or what corporate America calls healthy conversation, is that MacArthur imposed Constitution. So Uncle Sam kills so many people with world-ending technology and then says, good game, you do this. Right. Rightly, you would be pissed as well, right? And that's why people always argue about revision to the Constitution of Japan, specifically Article 9. Article 9 is the U.S. imposed, well, the whole thing's U.S. imposed, but this is the big tent item for the U.S. and for the Allies. It said, hey, Japan, you can never again wage war to solve a conflict. You cannot have, a blue water navy or a maritime power. You cannot impose your will upon other entities in the region through conflict and violence and kinetic war.
A blue water navy, that's one that would be able to go out and impose force further than a certain distance, essentially, from the mainland. That's the concept, right?
Yeah. Brown water navy, you can kind of run your coast. Green water navy, you can futz around in the region, get up to some Saturday night shenanigans, right, of piracy and crime or force projection. Blue water navy, you can go anywhere in the world. You're the U.S. and someone in Tuvalu is talking mess. You can send the boys out.
Got it.
But also, it's very expensive, and it's one of those why would you do it things. Anyway, that's maybe a different story, but
what you can do is protect yourself, right? You can have a defense force. That's cool. We're cool with that.
Self-defense force. We were joking about this off air as a treat, right? Because then, rightly, you have to give a country the ability to at least defend itself. And this sort of gives lie to the idea of a Department of Defense in the United States.
Now Department of War.
Now back to Department of War, which it was for a long time. But, the argument is, look, we get it, says Japan. We're not going to send out bombers over Vietnam or something, right? Or we're not going to take the Philippines. But if someone comes and attacks Tokyo, we need to have some resources to respond. And that seems very reasonable, right?
Sure. As a treat.
Yeah. And you can have that, and that's okay, said the U.S.
Pat.
But really, the way this is set up, Article 9 is serious, and that is one of the reasons, as you said, Ben, that's like a big sticking point. But the rest of it, in its entirety, was made up and created in the moment following World War II after Japan's defeat. And it was really was imposed by, there was this whole thing that we can get into where the concept was we can have a bunch of smart people who know the government in Japan get together and make the new constitution. And they started doing that. But then the U.S. came in kind of at the last minute and said, well, actually, we're going to use this one. And it was overseen by General MacArthur. So just the entirety of the Constitution ends up being this thing that's kind of held over you if you're, a Japanese citizen, as like, this is how we have to function. Why does it have to still be like this?
And it was not written by the people of that country is the important thing. The U.S. did, for another analogy, the U.S. did something executive producers do. Came in and saw what people are working on and said, great job, guys. Good hustle. I've got some notes. Can you do this, but completely different? And it's my thing, but now it's yours and you have to do it. Great meeting. All right.
But also it's my thing and my name's going to be on it.
But also it's my thing. And why don't we just call it the MacArthur Constitution? Anyway, the other thing they fight about in the LDP is going to be how foreign policy should work with communist countries in the region. Cough, cough, China. right? Not great friends of Japan on either side. So they also talk about whether this will be important later. A lot of other folks don't like this. There's a lot of internal argument over the nature of ties with the United States, which makes total historical sense. Like, how cool do you want to be with these guys?
Well, apparently really cool because, stuff's booming over here economically. We'll train all these cars, video game systems, and tech, and woohoo!
Yeah.
But also, oh wait, what did those guys do to us?
Yeah. Also, everything you learn about diplomacy, no matter what your genre of it is, can boil down to is sweet till it isn't. Right.
Yeah.
So we also see more radical beliefs popping up, anti-immigration.
Not like Ninja Turtles radical, though. This is like wild, off-base radical. Sorry.
Yeah, this is not bodacious.
No,
Anti-immigration, anti-LGBT proposals, the continual denial of historic war crimes. We've talked about the idea of preserving culture in Japan, or cultural identity, which may be another familiar thing you see a lot of parallels to in other parts of the world. In recent years, some very extreme versions of this conservative ideology have become super powered in Japan. Someone threw some high octane gas on the bonfire. This leads us to the current far right. A new kid on the block called Sanseito. Pardon our pronunciation.
I think he did fine. A super conservative, ultra nationalist right-wing party that was founded in 2020, very recently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if the more conservative members of the LDP party in the upper house, if they are caffeine, then Sanseito is cocaine, in terms of the extremity of their belief. And the name is weird. It translates to the Political Participation Party, but they also use the name the Party of Do-It-Yourself, or the DIY party.
Love it. Amazing. Do you get a political participation award for hanging out?
Yeah, but you have to make it yourself.
Okay.
Whoa.
It's really interesting. I love a craft.
It gives you the feeling, the sense of, we could actually decide what happens. You could decide what happens, right? Like that's a pretty powerful concept. And it feels like something that you could buy into before you even really understand what the party represents, or, what deep waters you're actually wading into.
Why can't we be the masters of our fate, the captains of our souls, right? Quoting Invictus there, paraphrasing. So this party, Sanseito, has people worried, DIY party, whatever. And they're worried because there's this crazy political rise to fame and success from a once fringe party. In some ways, you could compare it to hanging out in the Midwest with a friend of a friend, or a friend of your friend's cousin, who just smokes weed and tells you that Jewish space lasers are the world's most dangerous technology. And now all of a sudden, that guy and his buddies are in office. That's how people are reacting to some of this. And the question is a logical question. Yes.
Just thinking about that one person from Georgia who has said those things.
Yeah.
You know that one person?
Mm-hmm. There's this question, right? It's a logical one. How did this small group that's often dismissed as fringe and wingnuts and what have you, how did they gain so much power, so much influence, so much attention over such a short span of time, which we'll get into? And despite their xenophobic stances against all foreign powers, critics—
sounds familiar. Okay.
Right. Parallels, as we set up. Critics allege this might all be a front, that indeed certain foreign powers are funding this party, as helping this. They're helping this party to succeed, not because they want Japan to succeed overall, but because it's part of a long-term conspiratorial scheme to weaken Japan from within.
Oh, God. It's too close. It's too close to home.
Parallels. That's our ad break. Here's where it gets crazy. All right, parallels. As we're getting, I think we're going to find a lot of these as we continue. Can we kick a little bit of the origin story of Sanseito?
Absolutely. So for 3 years, Sanseito existed as a little tiny opposition party holding just a single seat in Japan's 248-seat upper house, also called the House of Councilors. This changed in the recent election of July 20th when Sanseito walked away with a whopping 14 new seats in the House.
Hmm. And this is not this goes back to our European comparison. You can have coalition parties, right? So you can have a group of, some people get, X amount of seats, and some other group gets Y amount of seats, and they team up and agree to largely vote together. That doesn't really happen in U.S. democracy because we're a young country and we're still trying to figure stuff out.
Yeah. Quickly, let's talk about that diet thing because it'll help us understand that upper house because there's an upper house and a lower house. Upper house, the House of Councilors, feels a lot like the Senate to me, although it's not the same thing.
It's not the same thing, but the diet is Congress. House of Councilors, let's think of it as the Senate.
Exactly. And then you have another House of Representatives, which is the lower house, it's very interesting. There are 480 members in that house, but I was looking through, I think it's the official website of the Prime Minister of Japan, and the way it's described here, I'm just going to say this out loud just so we hear it, and then maybe we can break it down.
Sure.
So there are 480 members of the House of Representatives. 300 are elected from the single-seat constituencies, and 180 by the proportional representation system, in which the nation is divided into 11 electoral blocks, which according
not
to
entirely
size,
dissimilar to the way we do things, right?
Is it kind of that way? Maybe I just don't understand.
Well, there's voting blocks and there's districts and redistricting and all that stuff and proportional representation over here. I mean, it seems like it has some things in common, but I might be oversimplifying.
So yeah, that would go into some of the redistricting stuff that we're seeing in the news, where a certain representative, represents X people within these lines, that kind of thing. Okay, that makes sense. So then the House of Councilors, the total membership, at least according to this website, of the House of Councilors says 242, says 96 of those are elected the proportional representation system, and then 146 from 47 different prefectural constituencies. And again, I don't understand all of that stuff, but it is important to know that term office for someone in the House of Councilors is 6 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And again, proportional representation is going to be familiar to anybody thinking of the House of Reps here in the United States, wherein the number of Congress folk you get is based on the population.
Yeah, and people are always talking about, we picked up a new seat, because the population changed or whatever. And then there's, of course, even obviously some not super hard to detect ways of trying to manipulate that, Yeah.
Yeah. Mr. Mander. Jerry has entered the chat. So how do we explain this meteoric rise from one seat for 3 years to all of a sudden, in a recent, just an election a few months ago, now we got 14 seats. And this can make a big difference, especially when you have coalition systems. We can't ignore the COVID-19 pandemic.
It shook up a lot of stuff in a lot of places.
And it put a lot of people in a situation where they were much more vulnerable to the mechanisms of online disinformation. And this is where we see Sanseito really rolling up with some big dice.
And again, how familiar.
Parallels. Everything is precedent. And a lot of these things are sadly similar. The Japanese public, like the rest of the world, is locked away, and this political movement blows up on the internet. Partially as a result. There are just more eyes on more screens. Their members get known for trumpeting conspiracy theories about vaccinations, anti-Semitism, revisionist history, and more. And they find an audience. Huge percentage of their voting demographic is going to be young, 18 to 30-year-old male, searching for alternatives to the status quo because the economy is rough. Right? Earlier generations, you could get a job for life at a large corporation, but younger folks are having a much more difficult time finding long-term substantive employment.
Well, we talked about how serious school is taken in Japan, culturally, and just how much pressure is on each individual student to truly, fully succeed, to get to go to secondary school or higher degree to continue on to get that good job, right?
Well, and with that, almost a guarantee within that system of getting that career that you were promised, of carrying forth that legacy.
Which is why suicide rates tend to spike after people receive their final exam grades and their college acceptance letters.
Yes. But you also see this thing happening in Japan and the United States and across the world, where the older generation of folks is staying around for much longer now, right? To run corporations, to, be in that job that would be the next jump up so that you could get new people in to hire. Within government, the old guard is sticking around, right?
Well, yeah. But by saying stick around, we mean that they're retiring later.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, people are retiring later, but you've also got folks, we're talking about how often you have to get reelected to a term, right? Either 6 years if you're in the upper house, 4 years if you're in the lower house. And they're seeing people stick around there and get reelected over and over and over again. And you can imagine the view of it's time to switch these people out.
Yeah.
No, and that's a base belief without any of the other stuff on top of it. Just that feeling.
Right. And it's a universal feeling too, right? Your time's up, old man. Let me take the stick. That kind of thing.
And they all say no.
Very few of them say yes, even if they're talking directly to their own scion. But in addition, because of these economic factors, we see that marriage is difficult, right? Raising children is a hefty financial proposition. Buying a home, these are all much more difficult to accomplish. And there's still, of course, this conservative milieu that says, hey, you as a woman you can't have a kid and have a job, right? Or you as a dude, right? When you get your forever job, when you become one of those vaunted aspirational salarymen, well, your family kind of exists on the weekends, okay? And everybody be cool. And a lot of people are saying, oh, wait, hang on, I'm a human being. That's actually not super cool. And these are understandable problems.
That's the response.
Right.
Well, so we even talked about within that culture, how some very interesting entrepreneurial situations pop up, like companies that will quit your job for you so that you don't have to face your boss. Or even, Ben, I think you and I were talking offline about this, companies that will disappear you. Yes. If you've shamed your family or whatever, so you can live off the grid and not have to, be ridiculed and be seen as a failure.
Yeah, they'll obscure your trail. And it's not illegal to disappear, folks. As we talked in the past, the concept of pseudocide is dicey, but just leaving, just sort of laying down away from society, there's nothing illegal about that as long as you aren't ditching out on debts and as long as you're not trying to get money by faking your death. So we can't blame a lot of people in very competitive environments for just getting tired and burned out. And you vote with your actions. Ever since the beginning of tribes, that's the number one way people vote. And when we see that perspective, we see that a lot of Japanese nationals are voting with their actions by saying, well, why would I bother getting married? Why would I sign up for this hellish Sisyphean life of working till I die, right? And then barely seeing a kid and then yelling at the kid when I do see them. So as a result, birth rates are plummeting. Even the popular media accuses other countries of trying to besmirch Japan's culture and reputation. You click on, you're hanging out somewhere, right? And izakaya or at a hotel room or something, you see the news, the local news, and there's this heavy implication that the world is telling you it is wrong for you to be Japanese.
Yeah, but we also see, in parallel to that, a massive rise in popularity of Japanese cultural things.
Abroad, yes.
Yes, in other places, which is just a very interesting notion to have those two movements occurring together.
Oh, yeah. Every country is a land of contradictions, right? And I love this point because it brings us to more parallels. Here, amid COVID-19, right? Sanseito hits the zeitgeist. They urge potential voters to be proud of your ethnicity and culture. There's nothing inherently wrong with that, except when it leads to, racism and things like white supremacy and so on. They also pivot and they say, you know how your life is tough and you're kind of unhappy and unsatisfied? Well, it's not due to the economics of Japan itself, really. Instead, it's due to these foreigners, these immigrant hordes. The phrase they use over and over again is silent invasion. It's due to these globalists who are messing with something that would have been fine if we never said yes to the Portuguese in the first place, basically. So they say, this is the motto, Japan first.
Huh.
No familiar.
Sorry.
Make Japan.
It's almost like they got the idea from somebody who also got the idea from somebody. This is just a pattern. I mean, this rise of nationalism and then words like patriot or nationalist almost beginning to have a dog whistle feel to them, for xenophobic or racist.
Yeah. And to your point there, the reason it sounds familiar is because this party, the DIY party, explicitly notes the phrase Japan first was inspired by the current U.S. President, Donald Trump.
Okay.
So they're not making
a
a secret. They're saying, we think this is a pretty cool idea. Yeah.
Wow. Yep.
And then they continue with international racism, not really targeting like Canadians and U.S. folks and other folks from the Anglosphere, although they hate Australian tourists. Sorry, guys. There's a reputation that was somewhat earned. But they...
How do they feel about American tourists? Seriously, like what have you experienced, Ben? I mean, just what have you experienced traveling through Japan? Has it been? It doesn't seem like it's been negative at all.
No. Usually there for specific reasons. Always, it depends on where you go, right? So you go to Tokyo, it's like you're going to New York or London. People are too busy, right? In general, I will say in Tokyo, there's a little bit more of an emphasis on helping folks who may clearly seem out of their depth. So the public transit is awesome, right? It's worlds away, streets ahead, as community would say, but it can be very confusing if you don't know where you're going, right? Because it's essentially a circulatory system for a country. So there's this whole cottage industry of volunteers, often older people, often older dudes. They don't necessarily work for the transit system, but they pick a day out of the week and just hang out at the station, and they help people figure out where to go. It's a pretty beautiful thing. And, I'll tell you, it probably wouldn't happen in Boston.
Well, and my understanding, too, is that in general, people there are pretty, and to your point, Ben, in the bigger cities, pretty helpful to tourists and not always doing it for money. They're proud of their city. And I think tourism is obviously big money there. And it does not seem, to my eyes anyway, that there's a resentment like you might see in places like Barcelona.
And it's also very much it's not an overt yelling society unless someone's having a bad day and they assume that you don't know any Japanese. But there's also an intense, relatively skin-based hierarchy. So if you are a lighter skinned person from the U.S., you are going to be treated differently. And you're probably going to be, there's going to be a slightly more friendly attitude toward you than if you were a darker skinned person. Like in rural areas, I've never had an issue. In cities, I've never had an issue because I'm a huge believer in the idea that energy is a two-way street. So if you are respectful with someone, right, and you are understanding the boundaries that they may have, and you put just a little bit of time in to figuring out how to not look like a it's going to go a long, long way.
Dude, that's the key to life right there, my friends. Just don't be a and read the room. Don't make yourself a target. Well, it's a good.
But I have seen to your question direct. I have seen people who are just tired of all these tourists, especially in very tourist heavy cities like Kyoto at certain times of year.
It's more of an exasperation than hostility, right?
Yes, but exasperation is a cousin of hostility.
That's true.
And one of the big complaints, for instance, that you will see, and this galvanized Sanseito as well, is the idea of, hey, these tourists are crowding all of the trains and the buses. I'm not here for, insert festival. I live here and I have to get to work on time and I can't get on the bus because of all these gosh darn, and then they'll insert a phrase. And that phrase, I mean, often the discrimination, the complaints are going to be centered on Singaporean and Chinese nationals, more so than Americans or Aussies. Yeah, it's deep. It goes deep. But
we also see something parallel here with like what's happening in Spain. I think we've just mentioned that with housing prices,
That's exactly
and
right.
rental homes,
Exactly.
and
crowding people
like,
out of their own city.
Yeah, and pricing people out.
Yeah, exactly. And with this, we have to realize there is already, like, this didn't come from a vacuum. There's already a lot of emphasis placed on who is Japanese, right? And we're speaking as non-Japanese people, to be clear, who is Japanese and who is not, and the indefinable but inescapable differences between the two. I'd like to give a shout out for anybody who's interested in learning more about this stuff. Check out our friend Miles's show on the Daily Zeitgeist. Miles has Japanese and African American heritage. Miles speaks Japanese. He is well suited to remark on this, and be fascinating to hear his view on Japan's far right. But
Do you think we could ever get him on? Like, that'd be interesting to do an episode with him on something like this.
It depends on what we want to talk about with him.
Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, we should check in. Yeah, we'll see. These are busy guys because their show comes out literally every day.
Couple times
every day. Wow. Yeah. So there's another fact here that we should mention. If you are not considered Japanese, if you're considered a foreigner by the Japanese government, you can become a foreign resident. You can even, with enough time and effort, become a Japanese passport holder. But the word for you that people will use for you does not translate to Japanese. It translates to foreigner with a Japanese passport.
Well, that makes sense.
It does. It's descriptive.
I don't know.
That's what's on the tin.
It's a bit of a dig. It's a bit of a dig, right? There's no question.
It's just very like
You will never be. You will never
exactly.
Be.
And so people are, looking around at all these terrible economic challenges. I can't get on the bus. I'm not doing anything special. I'm just trying to go to work. Very understandable stuff. These tourists are rude to me, right? Out in Golden Guy or whatever. But then we have to ask, is there an immigration crisis? Is there a silent invasion of foreigners? And that doesn't seem to be the case.
Well, we asked that same question over here. And I mean, there are a lot of people that have similarly, on paper, reasonable complaints about immigration here in the United States. But is it a crisis? Not necessarily, but it's certainly a way to rile up a particular base. And that seems like the same.
Points.
Yeah, exactly.
Again, parallels.
But often talking points that will rile people up enough to take action. Yes, exactly. But not necessarily based in truth. Right.
Don't hit the analytical part of the brain. Hit the emotive part of the brain. Right. Get that primal stuff cooking. And that's what happens. We see, if you go to the Straits Times, Japan's foreign residency rose 10% in 2024. Right. That's a big rise. That means the total population of permanent foreign residents is 3.76 million. That's a little over 3% of the population.
Whoa. That's not much.
That's not much at all. No. And keep in mind, a lot of those folks who are foreign residents are highly skilled workers, for instance, right? A lot of them are there because a big to-do company specifically wanted them there. Right, those kids who are out doing English teaching programs are not going to end up being foreign permanent residents. They're not going to end up getting that dubious distinction of foreigner with a Japanese passport. They're going to eventually skedaddle off, or maybe marry somebody.
Can I tell you guys, I really did have dreams of that.
Yeah,
of living in Japan.
Yeah.
And I don't know why that's instilled. Did you guys ever experience that when you were younger? Like the feeling or the concept or I don't know. It felt like a really interesting place to be.
It was always New York City for me, but I definitely understand the romanticization of a place like that when you're younger, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It was specifically Tokyo and it was something about, I don't know, pop culture at the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I blame Ninja Turtles. I don't know why.
Because everything looks like the future.
Ninja Turtles radicalized you, bro.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of people share that about any other number of places, right? Part of growing up is going somewhere else in some shape, form, or fashion. And so everybody has, I think, that impetus. And as long as you are realistic about it when you're there and you're respectful, then people are usually going to be cool with you. To show that we're not casting aspersion on Japan in particular, or even Americans, this happens in Paris all the time. There's actually a term called Paris syndrome, which is somewhat common among female-identified Japanese nationals who dream of going to Paris, because France is a huge deal culturally, and then they get to Paris, right? They see the needles and the graffiti, the used condoms, someone picks their pocket, and they break the heck down because this was not what Amélie told them would happen.
Whoa. No, they should call unwanted Parisian tourists parasites.
I love it. You're on fire today.
Sorry.
Dude, shout out to Parasite, first South Korean film to win Best Picture. Amazing.
Phenomenal.
Very good.
Yeah.
Talk about breaking the mold there, breaking out of all that money and stuff. Well, I don't know for sure.
Well, yeah. Well, there's also, I'm glad you bring that up, because there are also similar socioeconomic dynamics at play in the Republic of Korea and South Korea. Anyway, so a little over 3% of the population, foreign residents. Inarguably, this is a growth pattern. And the leader of Sanseito, again, this just started in 2020, he's a guy named Sohei Kimaya, and he uses statistics like this to stoke those public fears of foreign hordes invading the nation. And then in the same conference, he'll say, obviously, we're not going to discriminate against folks.
No. That's just the problem. But, it's a problem. It's a common problem.
Yeah, we're civilized. I'm just saying they're barbarians.
Jeez.
I'm just saying they're terrible. Everybody calm down. That's what's, again, parallels.
But it's so strange to see that when the rhetoric is kind of like that. We saw it similarly here in the U.S. and then to see the actions taking place with ICE and Homeland Security and all the things that are occurring right now. That I don't know about you guys, but to me, as almost an observer now of what's happening, you feel a little bit powerless to now watch it happening, because it was posed as this. It's just that, we're just saying these things. We're just talking about these things. We think these things. Doesn't mean we're going to do anything about it.
This is just an issue we need to collectively acknowledge, right?
Yeah.
And you see this a lot in Europe as well, in the European theater. It's happening all over the place. And the leaders of this political party will say, look, we're just saying we need to be aware, something we all need to get together on. And as a team, as a nation, we can address this somehow. The reason our platform is actually so popular is because we want to cut taxes. We want to boost public spending, and we want to protect jobs. Foreigners are taking all our jobs. This conference is over. So we see it everywhere. Far-right parties are on the rise in Europe, parts of Africa, definitely South America. I was surprised, as I'm sure all of us were, when Bolsonaro actually got sentenced to prison. Yeah. That was wild. I didn't see that happening.
Then France's government collapsed just like a couple days ago.
Yeah.
We're just seeing all kinds of craziness occurring.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. The heaves are up. And so some people will argue even, and this is observation, some people will argue that the Make America Great Again movement here in the U.S. is itself a far-right movement. Your perception of that may vary, but the big question now is, could organic popular support from the Japanese people alone, could that explain the massive wins of this thing that just until July was a wingnut fringe political party? So why has Sanseito succeeded where so many other similar Japanese movements, very similar movements, failed?
Right time, right place, right?
Hey, we'll tackle it after a word from our sponsors. And we've returned. So the big question, foreign funding and interference. Around the time of that recent July election, an analyst named Ichiro Yamamoto, a smart guy from a think tank called the Japan Institute of Law and Information Systems, went viral And he said, I have hard evidence that Russia, a foreign power, is heavily invested in this anti-foreign power political movement.
Wait a second. Are we saying Russia is directly putting money into campaigns, or are they doing stuff that they were alleged to have done here in the U.S. previously?
Right. Yeah. In one blog post, he claims to have hard evidence that, quote, anti-government propaganda by Russian bot accounts was what made this small far-right party so popular leading up to the election. And then he outlines the process, which is going to sound very familiar to a lot of us.
This is what he had to say. Russian bot accounts on various social media platforms, including X, TikTok, and Instagram, have been spreading false information and criticism about major government officials, including Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba and Foreign Minister Takashi Iwaya, to manipulate public impressions.
Yeah, so spam the online comms, which hacks the algorithm and gets that post or that conversation further up, increasing the chances that we'll meet a sympathetic stranger, gain a large number of likes, spread to more and more users, despite no one ever fact-checking it. Beautiful, brilliant, evil. He also notes these candidates from this party are appearing on Russian government media, which is true.
Really?
Yeah. Make Japan great again. Yeah. And then there are the allegations to your question, Matt, about dark money from Russia in a way that is very difficult to trace.
It always makes me wonder about the local level when money can sneak in there and then find its way up, right? Rather than in a high profile way come in to the people who are actually running for the House of Councilors or something.
That's exactly what it is. It has not been conclusively proven, any of these allegations for dark money, but it is much easier to trace national level financial shenanigans than the local stuff. And again, the reason we keep saying there are parallels is because large scale election influencers like the Koch brothers here in the United States and in other parts of the Anglosphere, but to a much lesser degree, they met with a lot of success funding local politicians for decades in the United States because they don't have term limits. They just hire the people who have term limits. They buy them and puppeteer them.
Well, yeah. And the people who end up making rules and regulations within like a small sector of the U.S. where, let's say, a factory is or where a business is run, which ends up being a huge deal for, somebody like the Koch brothers. But then if you're dealing with actual interference from another country, it makes you wonder, why would you do that?
Right. If you are so anti-foreign influence, if non-Japanese residents are a silent invasion, then isn't dark money and info war from a foreign power also a silent invasion? Isn't that the influence you were talking about being bad earlier? Yeah, maybe we didn't catch the right press briefing, but we want to be fair. The leaders of Sanseito have denied any and all allegations. The leader, Sohei Kamiya, was pressed about this on July 15th, and they said, hey, seriously, break it down. You f***ing with Moscow, man? You messing with Moscow money? And he said, do you have ties to him? And he said, we don't, not at all. Not with Russia, not with China, not with America. We do not. We keep balanced diplomacy with any country. And just because some of my folks appeared on Russian media doesn't mean we're suddenly pro-Russia. And they said, okay, yeah, we'd like to read some of your earlier statements about your support for Russia, just like while we're on this topic. So he got caught in the interview because he was on record supporting Russia's role in the Ukraine invasion, or supporting the Russian argument for that. And we'll give you a quote so you can see how he responded.
Yeah, upon seeing all of that, right, being presented with it in the moment, he replied, quote, Russia's military invasion was of course bad, but there are forces in the U.S. that drove Russia into doing that. So I said once that it's not fair to say Russia is the only bad guy here. And then people began saying, I'm pro-Russia.
Right. Just for being so pro-Russia. Yeah. I mean, from his...
From his
on the surface,
we know from our previous explorations of the situation happening in Ukraine right now between Russia about the complicated nature and the history, right, of ownership over that land, of all of that stuff. Like, we know it's more complicated than there's a good guy, there's a bad guy.
Always.
But it's one of those things when you get involved in that kind of thing, even to make a public statement about it, especially on one of the country's medias, it does seem to show some bias.
Yeah, from his perspective, he's being fair and balanced, right? He's saying, I am a statesman from Japan, so I don't have necessarily a horse in the race, which makes me more objective, right? It's you guys who are brainwashed and influenced. I'm not being paid or influenced by some conspiracy. So what does the official Japanese government make of this? They'll buy it. Spoiler, they don't buy what he's saying. They think Russia's up to something. They recently said through the deputy chief cabinet secretary, they said Japan is working on the premise that they're being targeted by foreign influence operations. They think something is screwy. And the
cabinet, by the way, is the executive branch within the Japanese government.
Yeah. They're the C-suite. And on July 16th, just 4 days before the election, he also said, the same cabinet secretary said, Japan is a target of foreign election interference. Lo and behold, this once cartoonishly obscure political party walks away with the biggest growth of any Japanese political party in recent history. It makes you wonder.
Yeah, but surely it's just the grassroots movement of do-it-yourself attitude, right?
It's DIY, man. Bootstraps.
Yeah. Power to the people. That's what we say in St. Petersburg. We also know, we were talking about this a little bit off air. You can go to Japan in many cities, rural areas, you'll see something called the Yoko Dantai. These are far-right activists, internet trolls, dudes with honestly sick vans. They converted their vans.
Bro, do they have flames on them?
They got
skulls.
They got all
shag
kinds
carpet
of propaganda. They've got these amazing loudspeaker systems. They roll through towns and do protests. They've got buses. They've got charter buses. They've got all these propaganda slogans. They'll sing patriotic songs.
So they're well funded.
Someone's funded.
By whom? Yeah, that's okay. We're on the same page. I mean,
it was Miku.
Those things ain't cheap, and it sounds like they're new. It's not like a ragtag, right?
They've been around for decades, but they now appear to have garnered much more funding.
That would make sense.
Yeah, so they implore the public to stand up for Japan. I actually got a high five from one of these guys because I was just standing around in Hokkaido and I didn't know what they were saying. I was like, these guys know how to throw a party. And I high-fived him. He high-fived me back.
It's not that kind of party, Ben. This is a far-right party.
Yeah, I hope that doesn't come back to haunt me.
No, but I doubt it.
They're talking about ridding the great nation of foreign invaders, leeches, and parasites. And they're usually, when they're saying that, to be explicit, they're usually talking about people from other Asian countries that they don't like, like Korean-descended populations who have lived in Japan for generations and generations, right? And they're talking about often darker-skinned people, especially they're talking about how they don't like Chinese people. Their cause is galvanized. They're gaining new followers, more influence, a bigger say in government, and they're aligning with one of our favorite secret textbooks, Alexander Dugin's Foundation of Geopolitics. Dun, dun, dun.
We did a whole episode on Alexander Dugin, yeah?
Yeah, the Alex Jones of his time. The Steve
Dugan Nash. No, that's different. Do check that out if y'all aren't familiar. Longmont Potion Castle. It's these absurdist, like proto jerky boy, but way more psychedelic prank kind of phone calls. And there's one where there's a character he's talking about named Dugan Nash. Sorry. Total aside.
That's amazing. The episode we did was called Does Russia Have a New Rasputin? And I believe you could find it from 2019.
Yeah. Well, it's still up. And we hope it is. This book, do check out our episode on it, which if you re-listen to it, it's kind of frightening. But this book is made by a guy who's kind of often called an occult wingnut, right, who just sat down and made a bunch of opinions and directions for Russia to reemerge as the world's primary superpower. And so he has a laundry list of stuff that the Russian government should do across the planet, largely to weaken and attack the United States asymmetrically. And he breaks it up into different spheres, what we would call regions, right? The East African sphere, the East Asian theater, stuff like that. And his idea for Japan was not that you attack Japan directly, not you try to sanction them or something, which Russia would have a hard time doing, but instead that you manipulate their internal domestic politics and culture. You maybe give them a deal. You give them the Kuril Islands, which are very north in Japan. And then you use that leverage and that dissent you have created to remove Japan from the international board other than supporting your causes and saying like, hey, there's not really a good guy or a bad guy in Ukraine.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's working.
All of this, when thinking about the context of what just happened during Victory Day in China and the coalition of forces that are building there and the movements and some of the public statements, specifically by Xi Jinping and some of the leaders there, you can see movements occurring. And it feels like this could be a big part of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. You can see the question is, are we recognizing a pattern or are we manufacturing one to fit our own assumptions? And that's always a very difficult question to answer at this point in the game. But however they came to prominence, this political party, Japan's far right and their allies, they're having a field day. And no one is sure what is going to happen next. And we know politics are always a sensitive issue, especially now here in the States. And that's because voting and civic action and activism has largely been replaced by the dopamine casino cycle of social media. It's difficult. It's pickle because we have to ask, is this a case of a nation truly speaking its own voice? Not just in Japan, but in every country, especially now. If it is true, if this is organic democracy, then we don't have to love it. We only have to acknowledge it is democracy, and that's how it's supposed to work, for better or worse. But there are serious, dangerous questions about how much of this is actually organic and how much instead is the stuff they don't want you to know.
I certainly think it is. In our previous episodes and explorations of specifically what the United States would do to weaken another country when they would go into Latin America, South America, certain countries in Africa, it is the exact thing that we're looking at here and in parallel in the United States, where you weaken the internal systems and the human beings that are supposed to govern those systems and the culture and politics and all of that stuff. As you're weakening all of that, it means the governing bodies, the decision makers at the top, are not going to be as strong, and they're not going to have the will of the people behind them to do certain things. Doesn't it feel exactly like that's what's happening? Whether it's occurring from within or from some exterior force, it feels like that's the very thing that's happening across the world in places like Japan and the US.
And it's happened before, and it's happening again. It's cyclical.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we cannot further emphasize that you should check out Foundations of Geopolitics, or at least our episode on it. And it's important to ask these questions because eroding trust in institutions, whether or not those institutions deserve to lose that trust, is the first step to massive upheaval. And that is not just the stuff they don't want you to know, it is the stuff that happens continually over centuries, over millennia. And this modern millennia is indeed no different. Except for one thing. We've got a podcast now, and we want you to be part of it. So let us know, help us understand the course of history, the past, present, and the future by giving us a call on a telephone. You can, of course, always get a random fact from us if you email us anytime, and you can find us on the lines.
That's right. You can find us on the lines. The handle Conspiracy Stuff, where we exist on Facebook with our Facebook group. Here's where it gets crazy. On X, FK8, Twitter, and on YouTube with video content for your perusing enjoyment. On Instagram and TikTok, however, we're Conspiracy Stuff Show. Matt, what you got for him?
We've got a phone number for you. It's 1-833-STDWYTK. Turn the letters into numbers, call the number, you'll hear Ben's voice, and then you've got 3 minutes to leave a voicemail. Please give yourself a cool nickname and let us know if we can use your name and message on the air within the message. If you got more to say, if you've got links, if you've got attachments, anything in the world, just have a thought, then write it down and send it to us. We have an email. We are
the entities that read each piece of correspondence we receive. Be well aware yet unafraid. Sometimes the void writes back. Conspiracy@iHeartRadio.com.
Stuff They Don't Want You to Know is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.